and welcome to another session on literary criticism and theory. We started with literary concepts and literary forms. In the last video, we had discussed literary forms. We stopped. We did not complete it, though we completed one feature of or one topic from literary concept, that is objective correlative. We also started with one topic from literary forms, that is the lyric, but we did not complete it. So let's complete it in this video. We started from the forms, from the section of forms, literary forms. We started with the lyric. We discussed its origin. It was a Greek song. It had two classifications, or it was divided into two classes: melic or lyric song, and you have the choric song. And it is from this melic or lyric song that we have the lyric or lyrics. Earlier, or in the period in Greece, it was a single voice. It was sung by a single voice to the accompaniment of a lyre. But later, we have it retains some of its characteristics, and we have it as an expression of single voice, and it becomes a musical composition. That is, instead of using any instruments, words were given rhythm. English as such is a rhythmic language, or it has a rhythm, and it was the Elizabethans who were the masters of bringing out or investing words with highest musical quality. Their lyrics were a kind of word music or verbal melody, and Keats, Shelley, Tennyson were the ones, and Swinburne also, were the ones who reveled or who closely studied this and used this this type of poetry the most. We also discussed the subject matter of the lyric. It is mostly subjective in nature, and it is usually of shorter length, not very long. Yes, we do have long ones also, but according to Edgar Allan Poe, it is better that it is short, because any musical composition, if it is long, then it cannot sustain its rhythm, or it cannot sustain its beauty throughout the poem. Somewhere in the poem the rhythm will be lost, so it is better and advisable that it is short, according to Edgar Allan Poe. Now, so this was very subjective in nature, and we also discussed the structure of lyric. The structure can change, can vary. Okay, so there are certain lyrics which do not have these threefold structures. There are certain areas where the structure can change. Like, for instance, I talked about the last structure, that is the third structure, having an intellectual conclusion. It can also happen that some lyrics may not reach an intellectual conclusion at all, and therefore we cannot completely say that this threefold, or we cannot completely say that this pattern of structure is followed everywhere. But usually or generally, it is this threefold structure that we find in most of the lyrics. And the first one is the motive, or where the emotion of the poet is spoken about. The first stanza, it is short, and it introduces the emotion or the subject that has set the poet's imagination working. And then we have the second stanza, which actually forms a bulk of the poem, and it talks about various thoughts that follows in the mind of the poet. it in fact reaches the highest pitch of eloquence here in or passion in this section. And the third one is like a return back to the first stanza, and that is the conclusion. And again, that is also short. And it ends with an intellectual kind of judgment. It is often a general view of what the poet has understood about the world. All right. We also discussed Herrick's poem. The Two Blossoms, and I told you how it is divided. All right, so that's with the structure of the lyrics. So let's get to understand the various lyrics, various forms of lyrics. But before we move on to that, I want you to turn to page number 194 in your textbook, and let's read this before we move on to odes. The first one, that is, the genre also includes extended expressions of a complex evolution of feelingful thought, as in long elegy and meditative ode. So it's not just short ones, but you also have very complex, feelingful thoughts that you find in long elegy and meditative odes. Like, for instance, you have an elegy written in the country churchyard. It's a longer poem, and it's a meditative poem as well. And within a lyric, the process of observation, thought, memory, and feeling is organized in variety of ways. In each poem, if you look at each poem, you will find that the thought, the observation, memory, and feeling of the poet is organized in different ways. For example, in love lyrics, the speaker may simply express his state of mind in an ordered form. Like, for instance, in Robert Burns, "Oh, my love's like a red, red rose," and in Elizabeth Barrett Browning's "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways," or may gallantly elaborate a compliment, like in Ben Jonson's "Ring to me only with thine eyes," or it may deploy an argument to take advantage of fleeting youth and opportunity, like in Andrew Marvell's "To His Coy Mistress." That's a Carpe Diem poem, which tells or urges the lover to make love. Your beauty will soon be lost, so let's make love when we are young. That's what Andrew Marvell's poem is about. So if you look at each poem, if you look at Robert Burns, it is in a very ordered form. It's quite different from Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem, where the poem is orderly, but it's like a reply. Okay, it starts from, "What do you mean? How do I love you?" So that question itself is like it's probably an answer to Robert Browning's love letter to Elizabeth Browning, asking her, "How much do you love me?" So she says, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." So it starts like a reply. So look at the way it changes. And you have Robert Burns, he's directly comes to the point and says, "My love is like a red, red rose." And Elizabeth Barrett Browning, you would see it as a reply, an answer to the doubtful, or to not doubtfulness, to the question or the inquiry of her lover as to how much he loves her. Or it can even be a compliment, an elaborate, gallantly compliment, like you have in Ben Jonson's "Drink to me only with thine eyes." Okay, so it has a beautiful compliment there. And then it can also mean an argument, an argument where, Andrew Marvell is advising his shy, coy means shy, his shy mistress, who says, "No, don't, it's bad to have a physical relationship before marriage. So when she says stop, he's giving her ample lot of reasons to tell her that youth is something that has to be enjoyed and you shouldn't wait for it. He tells her of the fleeting youth and grabbing opportunities. It's all carpe diem policy, carpe diem. Okay, they seize the day. That is carpe diem. Make hay while the sun shines. Actually, though we use that word, that proverb, it has a negative connotation. We say make hay while the sun shines in a very positive sense. That is, you have to work hard when you can. You must work hard at the right time. Make hay while the sun shines means when everything is favorable, you must do what you're supposed to do. You must do it when things are favorable. But it actually has its origin from the carpe diem policy. Make hay while the sun shines is actually about enjoying one's youth when you are young and beautiful, enjoying the day, seize the day. Okay, that kind of expression. So you see how in each lyric the way or the process of observation, the process of thought and memory changes. How the poet uses a variety of ways to show the process of his or her observation, his or her thought, his or her memory, and so on. And also, if you look at Shakespeare's sonnets, which you have studied in your first year, if you look at the first 17 sonnets, I told you about the first 17 sonnets. First 17 sonnets are called procreation sonnets. Right? Procreation sonnets 1 to 17. 1 to 17, it's called the procreation sonnet, where Shakespeare is urging his friend, his young youth, the young youth, to marry, to get married, so that his beauty shall be, his beauty will not go in waste. All right, and it will be transferred to the next generation, and it will move on like this. He's such a beautiful man, and so he's urging his friend to marry and produce children. Okay, so that is a different way of writing, addressed to a male youth again. Or it may express a cool response to an importunate lover, like you have in Christina Rossetti. No, thank you, John. Okay. So all these kinds of lyrics, you find a variety of ways in which the poet writes. Then in other kinds of lyrics, the speaker manifests and celebrates a particular disposition and set of values. So you have John Milton. If you look at John Milton's L'Allegro and Il Pensiero, these two poems, they express a set of values. L'Allegro is all about happiness, and Il Pensiero is about melancholy. So L'Allegro is a poem about where he expresses or he speaks about happiness. L'Allegro is happy man, and Il Pensiero is melancholy, where melancholy is addressed. So it's all about set of values. Okay, or it might express a sustained process of observation and meditation in the attempt to resolve an emotional problem. Like, for instance, Wordsworth's and ode intimations of immortality. You will find Wordsworth grieving over the loss of that innocence that he once used to have when he was a child. When he was a child, he used to love nature. That innocent love of the child was very much evident. Now he says that once you attain manhood, once you become a man, you lose that innocence, and you will not be able to enjoy nature as you used to enjoy when you were a child. So that emotional problems that is there in the mind of the writer or the poet he's trying to resolve those problems through observation and meditation. Okay, and then you have Arnold's Dover Beach. The same kind of emotional trouble is portrayed there also. Or it can exhibit making or justifying the choice of a way of life, like you have in Yeats' Sailing to Byzantium. So all these, if you look at all these, so in Sailing to Byzantium, the main theme of the poem, it presents two things actually. It presents the transience of life and permanence of nature. Just like you have in Keats the transience of life and permanence of art. So just like that in Sailing to Byzantium, where you have Yeats speaks about the transience of life and permanence of nature. The speaker in the poem actually wants to escape from the world where wise people are neglected. He speaks about the young generation which is very much caught up with life, that they fail to understand what the natural world offers to them. This comes as a reminder and an advice to us, all of us. ഈ പാൻഡമിക്കിൻ്റെയൊക്കെ കാരണം വേറൊന്നുമില്ല, നമ്മൾ നേച്ചറിനെ മറന്ന് പ്രകൃതിയെ മറന്ന് ജീവിച്ചതിൻ്റെ ഒരു വലിയ ഒരു അടിയാണ്, തിരിച്ചടിയാണ് അല്ലേ? അല്ലാന്ന് പറയാൻ പറ്റുമോ? പ്രകൃതി വിരുദ്ധമായ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചെയ്തത് കൊണ്ട് തന്നെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ഈ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഈ ഒരു സിറ്റുവേഷൻ നമുക്ക് വന്നത് തന്നെ. So he is actually speaking, the poet is telling the world that he knows, since Yeats says that he is the writer, the poet says that being wise, being a man who is wise, he knows that man can find solace and satisfaction only in the lap of nature, and therefore he prefers leaving his country and he sails happily to Byzantium, which offers him immense pleasure and fruits of eternity. So the term Byzantium, that is an ancient Greek colony which was founded by a man called Byzas, and this is what Yeats is referring to here. It's a very old place or a Greek colony, and this fell during the period, or when this was attacked by the Ottoman Empire, and thus it was ruined. So he's speaking about sailing to this old town or this old place of Byzantium and leaving his life or his place, his country. So it's all about it's a very philosophical poem, making and justifying the choice of a way of life. Okay, so that's one thing. If you look at all these poems, you will find a variety of ways in which the poet has expressed his observation, thoughts, memory, and feelings. Now let's move on to the ode. So we look at the different types of lyrics. Ode is a long lyric, denotes a long lyric poem that is serious in subject and treatment, elevated in style, and elaborate in its stanzaic structure. So what is an ode? First of all, an ode, like its parent form, the lyric, the ode is, again, since its parent is Greek, it is also Greek. Okay, it is very serious kind of a poem, and it has a very dignified composition, and almost always it has a rhyme, and it's longer than the lyric. Actually, it's longer than its parent. Okay, it's not a short one, it's a long one. and it is in the form of an address and is sometimes used to commemorate or celebrate or remind an important public occasion. Each of these characteristics can be analyzed separately. Like for instance, if we look at the first one that we spoke, the subject matter, it is serious, right? So let's start analyzing this ode as a serious poem. It is exalted in subject matter and elevated in tone and style. Okay, its subject matter is very high, its tone is elevated, it's a very serious one. At the same time, it is of a very rich kind of, it has a very rich tone signifying very a supremacy, and neither the theme nor its treatment can be trivial or undignified. It doesn't speak about anything very silly. It's not silly things in life. It's high philosophy or high things. The poet here, while writing an ode, is very serious, both in his choice of his subject and in the way he presents the matter. He must show himself at the height of his power. So his words that he chooses will be very, very eloquent, very high, very elevated. Note, for example, the difference between the style of Wordsworth's poem on a simple country scene and incidents and that of his very sublime poem, Ode and Intimation of Immortality, is different. I shall put a few lines of Ode on the Intimations of Immortality here to prove what I mean. If you look at his poems that reveal or that speaks about the simple countryside, like you have daffodils, they give you or speak about simple countryside scenes. Whereas if you or Lucy poems, all these are simple poems, not elevated one. But if you look at his poem, Ode on the Intimations of Immortality, it is serious. It is highly philosophical, and the scenes and the incidents portray the most high aesthetic form of Wordsworth. Okay, that shows his high, the poet is at the height of his power there. The words he uses, the rhythm he puts, the philosophy he adds in it is very, very different from his simple poems. So that's why an ode is always a serious one, a very serious kind of poem, and doesn't do anything, or the subject matter or the subject or the topic that the poet chooses is not trivial. Trivial means silly or undignified. Then the second one is it is longer, right? So the first one we spoke of is it is serious and dignified in composition and always has a rhythm in it. And then the next one that we spoke of is it is longer. So it is longer than the lyric proper, that is a proper lyric. The real lyric. A sonnet is a lyric, but that's a short one. Anyway, the lyrics are shorter in two blossoms, right? That is a lyric. So these are smaller, shorter poems, but a lyric on the other, an ode on the other hand is a longer one, because the emotion it embodies is a kind that admits of development. It shows the development, the inner development of the mind. It does not, like the lyric, aim at giving the effect of unpremeditated art, a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotion. Not that. It's not just a simple unpremeditated art. It is an expression that is expected to be much more than that. It is something consciously elaborate, impressive, and it is expected to show the inner psychology of the point, the development. All right. It may be full of deep and sincere emotions, but its expression is expected to be very, very, you can't simply write anything. That's it. That's a better way of putting it. You can't expect the poet to simply write whatever comes to his mind. A spontaneous overflow, that is fine. But when it comes to ode, his mood, his emotion may be the poet is being very sincere. Whatever is in his mind is being overflowed here. But again, he has to restrain himself, control himself, and use the correct words. He has to consciously choose words that really or perfectly matches the thought or the idea. It has to be impressive. It has to be consciously elaborate as well. And it must diffuse. The thought, the ideas, the words all must diffuse to form a beautiful poem that shows the inner development of the poet's mind. Clear? And then you have the third point. The third point is about its address. We said it is often in the form of an address, right? So unlike other forms of poems or verses, it is often directly addressed to the being or the object it treats of. The opening lines sometimes contain an apostrophe or an appeal, a request, which is the characteristic of the whole treatment of the poem. Like, for instance, you have in Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, it begins by a direct address to the wind itself. "O wild west wind." And another thing is Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn. How does the poem begin? "Thou still unravished bride of quietness." That's how it begins. Addressing the Grecian urn. It's a direct address. Okay? Then you have Tennyson's To Virgil, where you have Roman Virgil, "Thou that singest," and so on. So it's all direct addressed. The mode is maintained throughout in each case. Alright? And then we come to the next point, that is the theme. What is a theme? We said the theme, the theme is used to commemorate an important public occasion. Right? So what is the theme here? Sometimes the ode has for its theme a very important public event like a national jubilee, or the death of a very distinguished person, or the commemoration of the founding of a great university. For example, Andrew Marvell has written a famous poem, upon Cromwell's return from Ireland. That's an ode. And then you have Tennyson's Ode on the death of Duke of Wellington. These are some instances of the point. Now, the Greek ode had two forms. The Dorian ode, which is so called from the district and the dialect in which it arose, and the other one is referred to as the Lesbian ode, again named after the island of Lesbos, where it originally flourished. So you have the Dorian ode from the district of Dorian, and you have the Lesbian ode from the island of Lesbos. Okay, the Dorian ode is usually known as the Pindaric ode, and the Lesbian ode is referred to as the Horatian ode. So the Dorian ode was initially, in the beginning, in Greek, the Dorian ode was a choric one. I told you what choric means. Choric means it's a kind of collective song with a dance. Okay, so the Dorian ode was a choric one and was sung to the accompaniment of a dance. Its structure was borrowed from the movements of the dancers. So that's how we have the structure. The structure of the Dorian ode is from the movements of the dancers. And it consists of 3 parts. The first, that is a stanza form. It's actually a 3-part stanza form. So these stanzas, the poem is divided into 3 different stanzas. And the first stanza is called the strophe. Okay, and the second stanza is referred to as the antistrophe. And the third stanza, I'm not saying the first stanza, second stanza, I mean the first division or the stanza. It's a synonym. Strophe is actually a synonym for what? Can be considered as a synonym for stanza. Okay, it's a kind of musical metrical form. Okay, and you have the melodies mostly keep changing, but you have the same sort of words repeated differently, in a different way. And you just understand this as a stanza form. So the first part, the poem's first part is called the strophe. Okay, and then it is the next part is called the antistrophe, and the concluding part is known as the epode. Okay, so strophe, antistrophe, epode. Okay, that's the Pindaric ode or the Dorian ode. That's how it is divided. That's a stanza form. All right, and this sequence of strophe and antistrophe and epode can be repeated. Okay, any number of times it can be repeated in the poem. Don't think that it is like 1, 2, 3 alone. It can be repeated any number of times. Okay. And it has, like for instance in Gray's poem, it is repeated 3 times. So it is like 1, 2, 3, 3-fold division. Again, it is repeated 1, 2, 3. Again, 1, 2, 3. That is strophe, antistrophe, epode. Again, you have strophe, antistrophe, epode. And then again, you have strophe, antistrophe, epode. So that is repeated 3 times in Gray's odes, the progress of poesy, and also the bard. Okay, so it's a stanza form. Okay, that's all. That's about it. And this was brilliantly used by the ancient Greek poet Pindar, and that's why we call it this form is mostly known as Pindaric ode. Okay. Now then we have the Lesbian or the Horatian ode. The Lesbian or the Horatian ode is quite different from that of the Pindaric ode. Now in Pindaric ode, it's mostly, again, the subject matter is very serious. In Horatian or the Lesbian ode, the subject matter is not as serious as the Pindaric ode. Okay, it is more simpler in form. It's not complex. It's simpler in form than the Pindaric ode. And therefore, it is proved much more easier to the poets to imitate that than the Pindaric form. Pindaric form is very difficult, but Gray has beautifully used it. In fact, Gray has done justice to it in a very beautiful manner. Okay, and you have the Lesbian or the Horatian ode, which is quite different from the Pindaric ode. And this is used by the English poets, and it consists of a number of short stanzas, small stanzas, similar in length and arrangement. The treatment is direct and dignified, and the thought is very clearly developed. It was popularized by Roman writers like Horace and Catullus. The work of Horace in particular served as a model to English imitators. And the English odes of this type are mostly known as the Foration ode. Okay, and you have something similar to that in Andrew Marvell's Upon Cromwell's Return from Ireland, which is a lesbian or a Horatian ode. Okay, and the stanzas are very short and very similar. They have only 4, mostly in Marvell's Upon Cromwell's Return from Ireland. You have the stanzas, or they are very short. They have only 4 lines each, and are very similar also. If you observe the rhyme and meter also, it's similar. It's almost similar. Whereas in Pindaric ode, they change. The melody changes. The words are same, but the melody changes. Another thing that I forgot about the Pindaric strophe is that, see, I told you, right, it is based on a dance form, dance movements, poetry dance forms in the movements. That is choric lyric dance form. Chorus in accompaniment to dance. It's a collective song. Whereas lyric, on the other hand, we discussed that melic, or the lyric, on the other hand, is the single voice sung to the accompaniment of a lyre. Whereas choric, on the other hand, it is a collective song with a dance. So likewise here, this is a choric one. It is from the choric form. So what you have here is, it has a dance. It has a dance in the sense originally. History, I am telling you about the origin. Okay. So usually this choric was sung to the accompaniment of a dance, and therefore this structure, they developed this stanza form. This stanza form, the structure develop cheyidirikunnu ee dance forms inde ivarude dance forms inde korchu movements il ninnu ee strophe ennu parayunnathu ഈ സ്ട്രോഫി റിസൈറ്റ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ കോറസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കളക്റ്റീവ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആൾക്കാർ ആ ഗ്രൂപ്പ് സോങ്ങിൽ കോറസ് പാടുമ്പോൾ സ്ട്രോഫി ആണ് പാടുന്നതെങ്കിൽ, ആ സെക്ഷനാണ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സ്ട്രോഫി ആണ് പാടുന്നതെങ്കിൽ, what happens is, during that recitation of the strophe, the dancers, what they do is they make a turn from right to left. ഒരു ടേൺ എടുക്കുകയാണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. they turn, they change, they turn, തിരിയാണ് എങ്ങോട്ടാ, റൈറ്റിൽ നിന്നും ലെഫ്റ്റിലോട്ട്. ആ ഒരു മൂവ്മെൻറ്റിനെയാണ് സ്ട്രോഫി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, ആ ഡാൻസ് ഫോമാണ്. അതേപോലെ തന്നെ ആൻറ്റി സ്ട്രോഫി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ജസ്റ്റ് ഓപ്പോസിറ്റ്, കൗണ്ടർ ടേൺ ഫ്രം ലെഫ്റ്റ് ടു റൈറ്റ്. ആ ഒരു മൂവ്മെൻറ്റിനെയാണ് ആൻറ്റി സ്ട്രോഫി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് എപ്പോഴെന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും they come to us, the dancers stand still. They come to a sudden halt, or they stand still. Epod recite ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ, during the time when epod is recited, the dancers stood still. ഓക്കെ, ഇതിൽ നിന്നുമാണ് നമുക്ക് ഈ സ്റ്റാൻസയുടെ ഫോം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സ്ട്രക്ചർ കിട്ടിയിട്ടുള്ളത്. സ്ട്രോഫി, ആൻറ്റി സ്ട്രോഫി, ആൻഡ് ദി എപ്പോഡ് ഇസ്, വി ഗോട്ട് ദിസ് ഫ്രം ദിസ് ഡാൻസ് ഫോം, ഫ്രം ദിസ് ഡാൻസ് മൂവ്മെൻറ്റ്സ്. Okay, so I forgot to tell you that. Okay, anyway, coming back to Horatian ode or the lesbian ode, it's much simpler in form. It is not as complex as the Pindaric form. Pindaric ode is simple ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സംഭവമാണ് ഈ lesbian ode അല്ലെങ്കിൽ Horatian ode. ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ഓഡ്സിനെയാണ് they are typically known as Horatian odes. ഇതിലെ ഏറ്റവും മെയിൻ റൈറ്റേഴ്സ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് റോമൻ റൈറ്റേഴ്സാണ്, ഹൊറേഷ്യൻ, കാറ്റലസ്. ഓക്കെ, ആൻഡ് ആൻഡ്രൂ മാർവലിൻ്റെ ആ പോയം നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഇറ്റ് ഹാസ് ഓൺലി 4 ഷോർട്ടാണ്, വളരെ ഷോർട്ട് സ്റ്റാൻസയാണ്, ഹാവിങ് ഓൺലി 4 lines, and the meter and rhyme is almost similar, and they convey the thought in a very plain, very straightforward fashion. Okay, he nothing commented or mean upon that memorable scene, but with his keener eyes, the axe edge did try, nor call the gods with vulgar spite to vindicate his helpless rights, but bowed his comely head down as upon a bed. Another Charles I in the execution of Cromwell executed or charged him for high treason, and he was only king, the monarch who was executed for the Commonwealth period. Okay, and so these stanzas, they relate to you Charles, how he conducted himself in the scaffold. He did not ഒരു ബഹളമൊന്നും ഇല്ലാതെ വളരെ കാമായിട്ടാണ് ആ സ്കാഫോൾഡിൽ തല കൊണ്ട് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവിടെ നിന്നത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ കഴുത്ത് അവിടെ ബിഹെഡ് ചെയ്യാൻ നേരത്ത് വളരെ കാമായിട്ടാണ്. He took everything in a very calm, composed posture. Okay, so this style is, so there is a very direct ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സ്ട്രേറ്റ് ഫോർവേഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു തോട്ടാണ് അതിനകത്ത് പറയുന്നത്. പിൻഡാരിക് ഓഡ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് വളരെ കോംപ്ലെക്സ് ആണ്. The style is very sober and not too much of passion and warmth like in the Pindaric ode. In the Pindaric ode you will find a lot of passion and warmth, whereas here it is not very, it is very sober and very stately, very straight, very plain, very straightforward fashion. Okay, so that's with the Dorian or Pindaric ode. Dorian ode is also referred to as a Pindaric ode. It is the most successful imitation. It is based on the Greek poet Pindar. Okay, and that is why it is known as the Pindaric or ode. Dorian ode ആണ് Pindaric ode ആയിട്ട് അറിയപ്പെടുന്നത്. ലെസ്ബിയൻ ഓഡിനെയാണ് ലെസ്ബോസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഐലൻഡിൽ നിന്നാണ് ഒറിജിനലി അത് ഫ്ലറിഷ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളത്. ലെസ്ബിയൻ ഓഡിനെയാണ് ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ഓഡ് എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും ടിപ്പിക്കലി ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ഓഡ്സ് ആർ ഹൊറേഷ്യൻ ഓഡ്. ഇതിൽ ഏറ്റവും ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള റൈറ്റേഴ്സ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് റോമൻ റൈറ്റേഴ്സ്, ഹൊറേസ് ആൻഡ് കാച്ചസ്. ഡീറ്റെയിൽസ് നിങ്ങളുടെ 195 പേജ് നമ്പർ 195 അതിൻ്റെ കുറച്ച് ഹിസ്റ്ററി ആയിട്ടുള്ളത് അതിന് ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളത് ഇതിനകത്തുണ്ട്. പിൻഡാരിക് ഓഡ്സ് എന്തായിരുന്നു, അത് praising and glorifying especially the Olympic Games, victorious athlete in the Olympic Games and all those things. Okay, so you can just read through the important points I have already mentioned. So that's it for the odes. So till then, thank you and keep safe.